taking a moment to get here. As always, I'm electronically challenged. So, seed starting 101.
Can I butt in for just 1 second?
Absolutely, Martha.
If people want to just see Jack, if you don't want to see all the other little icons, you can just click or just move your icon over his face. And there's a pin there, and you can, if you pin that, then it's just him. And if you don't want to just see him, you unpin it by moving your cursor and then the icon. And the same with Velma, when Velma speaks, if you'd like to just see Velma. Does that make sense? Okay, go ahead, Jack, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay, so here we are. It isn't spring yet, but we'd all like to be there. I'd like to begin this session by asking everybody who's willing to jump in and introduce themselves. And I beg two questions. What's your gardening experience? Why did you get into gardening? And then more specifically, why are you looking at seed starting? What's your motivation for starting seeds? Anybody want to jump in with a response to that question? I can't see everybody's faces, so you're just going to have to jump in.
Jack,
Come on, Polly.
I'll jump in.
Thank you.
Sobel, and I always start my zinnias inside to give them a head start, and it's a lot cheaper than buying the plants, for sure.
That's indeed it is.
Especially the flowers. And then I'll do vegetables outside. I found if I start like cucumbers inside, the ones I start inside don't do any better than the ones I plant outside when the soil is warmer. So that's one thing. And I think that's, what's that?
No, my wife Linda is over in the corner here. She's my technical advisor, and I was just asking her if she had any way of bringing my sound up. I can't see.
So that's basically. I'll let somebody else join. Say something.
And hi, I'm Lori. Can you see me? Because I can't see me on the screen. I can't see myself at all on the screen. First, I want to say hi to George and Martha, who are out there. I am a huge gardener, and I will sometimes plant by seed. I like to plant outside by seed, but indoors I have problems. Things get really leggy and just unwieldy, and I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm here just to get better at seed starting indoors.
Good. That's a good problem, and we'll try to talk about that one in particular. Molly?
Yeah, I can go. Hi, I'm Molly. Nice to see everybody. And my experience gardening, I've gardened in a bunch of different places, and I've worked in farming for some years, but I find that there's always more to learn, and I'd like to be able to learn from community members, and so just here to learn more.
Thank you. Great. Who else?
Fran, you're muted, Fran. We can't hear you.
There we go. Thank you. So I'm Fran Pomerantz. My husband and I have a large garden, and we do start a lot of things from seed. I do feel it's a little bit of a crapshoot. Some years things do great. Some years, just depending on the weather and when things can get in the ground, stuff gets leggy, or I wish it were bigger. Or so it's, I have seeds started now, but I feel like I can always learn more.
Cool. Anybody else want to participate in this round? Anybody? I can't see you all on my screen, so you're gonna have to just take yourself off mute and say, yes, I'd like to talk. No? Okay. All right, we're gonna. All right. You're in charge. All right, let's move on. Why do I think we deal with seeds? My personal experience is that my dad was a gardener and an avid gardener, and I was the oldest of 5 children, and so of course I have to pick up the gauntlet. You know, I'm obliged to be a gardener, and so it is. I've enjoyed it all my life, but more and more I'm realizing that I'm not really very good at it. I don't learn. I don't keep track of where was it that I had the tomatoes in the garden last year, because you want to avoid that this year, but I'm not sure I can even remember. So I don't bring a scientist's mentality to this thing, and you're going to learn that today. But I bring a lot of enthusiasm, and the core of my enthusiasm peaks when the little seeds are just beginning to push through the surface. There's something almost as joyful as my children arriving into this world, and I have 2. It's just a wonderful moment, and pretty much it goes downhill from then, because sooner or later there are little things called weeds which pop up, and I'm not remotely joyous about experiencing the weeds. They drive me crazy, and in the battle of the things I care about and I don't care about, all too often the weeds win, and by the end of the season I'm just curmudgeon-y, and that's about it. I like to think that our dealing with vegetable seeds in particular, but the joy of flowers as well, directly contributes to sanity in the food chain. And I think that that's an important issue today, and I think it's going to become an ever more important issue going forward. Growing our own vegetables is a great way to understand where our stuff is coming from, and that it's pesticide free and all the other things that bring nutrition to me. You'll find as you're picking seeds and vegetables to grow that there are vegetables out there that are available that have been developed specifically for satisfying the needs of the commercial market. And those aren't necessarily seeds that produce fruit that is good tasting, and it may or may not be nutritional, because often the ag business just wants to make seeds that produce fruit that you can pick with a machine and that will store well, and et cetera, et cetera. So their motives are not always perfect. And so you can be in the driver's seat about picking the things that nutritionally make sense to you and your family. So that's a good reason, I think, for growing your own. I think the business of nurseries getting the credit financially for starting your seeds is one reason for bringing that seed growing skill right to your doorstep. It just costs a lot more money to be buying your starts. And back to the story about what kinds of choices you have, they're driven an awful lot by what the nursery is selling. And so if you want exotic things, if you go through this catalog, I hope you can see this. This is one of my favorites, High Mowing. If you go through their catalog, you can be just overwhelmed by the range of choices that you have. But if you look for all of those choices at Walmart in their vegetable starts, there's an awful lot of the seeds here in High Mowing that you're not going to find at Walmart. So another reason for doing this yourself is to, get the things that you want. And as I said earlier, I think there's just a lot of satisfaction for me anyway, and I can imagine for you too, going through the whole thing. On the other hand, however, it's not very satisfying to start seeds and then having them fail. And I've done that a lot, and I don't always know why I'm failing. I'm going to go through the ritual that I do around starting seeds. It may be very familiar to you. It may not be, and but it's certainly not the only way. There probably are as many ways of approaching seeds as there are gardeners out there. So I'm going to just focus on one way that I do it, and I'll try not to spend too much time yakking. And when I'm done, we'll start an open dialogue, because I'd really like to hear about how everyone else does it. Hopefully all successfully. But if not, maybe you'll find some ideas in what I present. One of the main things you need to do right off the bat is figure out what zone you're in. Most of us are probably in zone 4, unless you're higher up the mountains in, say, West Bolton. Other places may get into zone 3, and but just keep in mind that where you are shapes how much growing season we have. There's very little that we can do, or the choices we have are greatly limited if you only have the window between last frost in the spring and first frost in the fall. That's our window of possibility for our gardens and our growing. But if we start the seeds indoors, or we run down to the nursery, either one of those two places has done some artificial things to extend the season. So I'm going to talk about how you extend that season in a warm place. In our case, the room that I hope you can see, because I can't see what you're seeing in this room, unfortunately. But this is a spare room in our house. It's usually filled to the rafters with the flotsam and jetsam of our life. And a lot of that has moved out into the hallway, much to the rest of my family's chagrin, to make room for this thing over here, which I hope you can see, which is a rack with lights on it. And those lights, which we'll talk about in a little bit, are what makes it possible for us to extend the growing season in front of the spring frost. Now,
Yeah,
yes, dear.
maybe you could ask the question. Who can see? Can you just respond if you can see?
Oh, can you all see me?
Yes.
Yes, Jack, we can see you.
All right. And if at some point you can't see what I'm talking about, and I'm trying to point to something and you can't see it, scream at me. This is unfortunate, but it's where we are. Thank you. Thank you for responding. I'm glad that somebody out there in the world can actually see me. But I love being seen. Okay. What do you want to grow? Some of the things that we grow in Vermont, you can seed directly in the garden, and that window between the two frosts is big enough that you can put the seeds directly into the ground. In that category are things like peas and beans, and you see farmers all over the place putting corn in. Those are things that can make it okay without pushing into this kind of indoor starting that we're about to talk about. And so one of the things you got to do is decide right off the bat, what are the things that are important to you to be able to grow? And then the next question is, are the things you want to grow ones that you can direct seed, or do you have to start them indoors? And this is a box of all the seeds that I have for this season. If this is anything, this is a statement about madness, because there's no reason why anybody should be planting that much stuff. That's an invitation to insanity, and here I am in the middle of it. To some extent, that's because I choose these, and my daughter chooses these, and my wife chooses these, and my dad always chose those, and so there's lots of stuff. I would advise anybody who's going down this path for the first time to be very conservative about how much you try to do. But also know that this lasts for years and years. There's a question, which I'll get to eventually, that somebody sent in about how long do the seeds last. In general, they last for a long time, so you don't have to feel panicky about having too many seeds in that respect. But anyway, you got to figure out what you want to grow, and then whether they're these inside ones or outside ones. And if anything, I would recommend that you don't do a lot, or do less than you think you absolutely have to have. You might also think about the things that, even though you, like, I never grow potatoes. I don't know, it just seems to me that potatoes are inexpensive. They don't bring me a lot of joy to grow. I don't think of them as a very attractive gift. And a lot of my gardening is just about giving away. We have our garden is 100 by 100 feet, and it's out on public land out beyond our house. And we do it as a community garden. And while I haven't been able to get a lot of people in my neighborhood to go down and join me pulling weeds, they're all delighted to receive the vegetables from that garden, and that's where a lot of it goes. My father always fed his vegetables up over the fence to everybody who was walking by, and so I try to maintain that tradition. So a lot of what we're growing is just growing to give away. It's not just that it's what my family is capable of consuming. Okay, so let's talk about supplies. There are things that will really help, and now I'm starting to talk mostly about indoor seeding. Some of the things you're going to need, I mean, what does a plant need? It needs soil to grow in, it needs light, it needs water, and to germinate, it needs a very specific environment. Most seeds want to germinate between 75 and 85 degrees, which is pretty warm for our soil, and it's pretty warm for inside our houses. So the way you deal if you're really trying to control the story, is you turn your thermostat up to 85 degrees, or you get one of these things. This is an electric mat. They go for around 19 bucks a piece. And this one mat is the same size as one of those, right? So that fits together as a little combo. And in the best of all possible worlds, you also splurge and buy yourself one of these. I don't know whether you can see it or not, but it's a thermometer, a thermostat that controls the heat that this thing is putting out. And there's a little indicator. Can you see that? That goes under the tray above the heat pad, and it controls the environment that the seedlings are in. Now, the next thing you need to talk about in terms of nurturing these little babies of ours is the soil. Now, you might be tempted to go in your backyard and scoop up some soil and bring it into the house. But I strongly recommend that while that's an inexpensive way to do it, it's not a great way to start your little babies. When those little seeds are popping open and trying to, stretch their legs and arms out into the world around them so they can start absorbing water and feeling good about themselves. They don't want to be bumping into hard soil. They don't want to be bumping into little stones and just junk. They want to be able to move freely. And so one of the things you're going to need to invest in, I really recommend you invest in, is some of this stuff. This particular one comes from Gardener Supply, but seed starting mix. This isn't compost. This isn't potting soil. It's a particular mix, non-soil. This one is made out of peat moss and vermiculite and a few other nice things, but it's a very light medium, and so the baby can throw out its arms and legs in this medium, and it holds just the right amount of moisture, snuggle up around them so that they can do that little bouncing out. Okay, so soil, heat, and then light. A lot of people start by trying to use their window sills as a place for a source of light. And it's a really bad idea. Unfortunately, it means all the light's coming from one side, for instance. So even if you keep turning your plants around as they start to break through the surface, it's always going to be a very one-sided light. It's not very strong. And those leggy plants that somebody, maybe it was Polly, mentioned, are often the byproduct of the seed reaching out, trying to find more sun, and in the process, developing this long, spindly shaft. And unfortunately, once that shaft gets out into the real world and the winds start blowing and all, it turns out to be not very strong, and the plants that have become leggy will continue to suffer, and they'll never be very productive. So having a light source, and a light source that you can get close to your plants, 3-4 inches, is a good idea. This is a little set of seeds that are just beginning, and they're on their nice little warm bed, and they got their nice light right on top of them. That structure is a a very inexpensive, I think I paid $17 for this one. It's a shop light, holds two bulbs. I don't know if you can see those, but two bulbs. And in this case, this bulb here is an LED. You can get what's called full spectrum lights. They're very special and fancy just for gardeners, and they're appropriately expensive. By and large, I wouldn't recommend them just because they're very expensive. And my experience and the experience of a lot of other gardeners is LED lights like this. Well, you can't see it, but anyway, just the kind of LED light that you would just have for your shop is perfectly adequate. And as I said, you can get one of those shop lights with LED lamp bulbs in them for as little as $17 at Home Depot and places like that. The other thing about the light source that's important to you is, I hope you can see this.
Want me to bring
The LED is hung. I can't see a thing, Joe, so you have to help me.
Okay, I just wanted.
Importance of the chain is that you can keep adjusting the height of the light. So you're always looking to move the light to about 3 inches from the top of the seedlings. Eventually, they're going to grow, so the light's got to go up too. If you don't do it, the plants will start to grow right into the light and get burned, and it's not a good idea. Okay, so light, heat, soil. We got to water these things. I like using these things. You pump them up, and I won't try to spray it in here. But it's a nice way of getting a very fine spray of water. And obviously those little seedlings need to be nurtured with water. You don't need to worry about fertilizer at this point in the game. They're perfectly capable of taking care of themselves until they're above soil, and then we'll talk about what happens to them. But something as simple as that can also work perfectly well too. If there's a problem in the world of gardening that I have, is that I overwater, and most good gardeners will tell you underwatering is probably better than overwatering, and I always go on the over side. It's hard for anybody to advise somebody else, I think, about when's the appropriate amount for watering. Your finger is probably the best indicator you're going to have for sticking it down there and deciding whether the soil is too wet or not wet enough. While we're working in these this kind of container, we'll have added the option of having this cell. This is a 72 cell tray. If it goes in one of these flat trays, then you can water down into that tray as opposed to putting water down from the top. And that's not a bad idea. There are a lot of reasons for learning how to do that and not overdo it, but it means that your plants are getting their moisture from below, and that's going to help draw the developing root structure down into the cell as opposed to staying on the top, which can happen more if you're just watering from the top. Okay, so water. Now, we've got the basic paraphernalia down, right? Any questions about what some of the hardware is that we need for seeding? Anybody? No? Okay. Well, we're just gonna keep going then.
I have
Jack,
a question for you, Jack. Can you put a little fan someplace nearby so you're on your seedlings air movement? Does that tend to help?
Good question. Excellent question. Early on, before the seeds break the surface, it's irrelevant, right? Because they're down there in their little world, protected from everything. But as soon as they get above the surface, the ultimate goal here is to get these little babies to grow up strong so that they can go out in the real world. And air movement definitely helps. I have a fan over here that you can't see, but I have, will have in this room as the seedlings are growing, a small fan to doesn't have to be a vigorous movement, but movement of the air. So the plants are just have the opportunity to kind of move. That does a lot of things. One, it strengthens the plant, just, because it learns how to be out there in the world. It also keeps things like any kind of mold or virus or anything that might like to find its way into that plant, keep it moving. It's just fresh air. Like we all want fresh air. The plants want fresh air. And so absolutely a fan in the environment or some way of, keeping it moving. A lot of old timers will tell you that the way they grow great tomato plants is that they talk to their plants every night. And part of the planting talk is that they wave their hands over the top of the tomato plants and give them a back rub, and some would argue that what they're doing with their hands, moving the tomato plants at that moment, is the equivalent of having a fan on them. Okay, so if you haven't got a fan, you can use your hand, but just keep them moving every now and then. Any other equipment questions?
Jack, I just wanted to add, and I don't know if anybody can see this, not all of us have space for a larger fluorescent light setup like you have. Mine is light that I got from Gardener Supply years ago, and it's probably about 30 inches long. And it's got a little chain so you can step down, lift the light up or down. And I just set it in my bay window. And another thing my girlfriend just told me that I haven't tried is I have fluorescent lights on each side of my sink on my kitchen counter. So she uses that. But by using that, you've got to lift those plants up and then gradually set them lower and lower.
Yeah, exactly.
So that would be an alternative. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that fluorescent lights have a good light spectrum in them too. So they're perfectly useful. If you've got some shop lights that happen right now to be fluorescent, you can just keep using them until they burn out, and then you can buy LED lights that are in fluorescent light format and put those in later. But I never thought of the idea of taking my plants into the kitchen would probably start a war in my house. But if any of you are lucky enough to have mates that are forgiving and you could take your plants into the kitchen, that's probably a perfect environment. And not the least of which is you're on a countertop that's washable and you don't have to worry about water moving around. My wife is giving me a very mean look.
This is a pity violin.
Oh, that's a pity violin? Oh, okay. No end grief from my cameraman. Okay, where were we? Let's hope we've got contained. I hope that I haven't overwhelmed you with the idea that there's a lot of dollar investment in moving forward here. There is some hardware, but it'll last forever, and you certainly don't have to do what I've done here. My goal for this year is 20 flats. That's what this rack will hold, and 20 flats times 72 plants means that, I don't know, somebody do the math real quick. It's hundreds of plants, and at $3 a piece, that's a lot of money. But I happen to be doing a lot of seeds, so if you're doing a small amount of seeds, like that 3-footer would accommodate. I'd like to think there are lots of ways that you could get to seed starting without being overwhelmed by the idea that you have to spend a lot of money. These things, incidentally, this is $2.50 for one of these things, and $2 for one of these things, and they're terribly convenient in this particular world. My wife just sent me a slip of paper that tells me that 20 times 72 is 1,440. That's the number of plants I think I'm doing this year. I may have to modify that a little bit, like by dividing it by 10. Anyway, these are very convenient, and they're a format that was developed by the commercial industry. Obviously, you probably recognize those, when you went down to your garden store. They also come in this kind of thing. This is 6, and it's a bigger cell. It's 2x2 instead of 1x1.
Jack,
And-
I can't see you now.
Yes?
I can't see you now.
Oh, you can't see me at all? Oh, gosh.
Just
Where
your
the hell am I?
Oh, your picture. I can't see what you're showing up, just so you know.
Oh, thank you. Is that any better? Am I at least in the frame?
Because you can't see this thing up here.
I can't see a thing, dear.
Up here.
Yeah, well, I can't see that from here. Okay.
Is that
better?
I can see you fine. I think it's on whoever's end it is that can't see you.
Can I suggest that if you got
Yeah, I can see you fine.
you'd be able to see what they're seeing. Okay.
Okay.
I'm trying to talk about money a little bit, and these things, I've collected these over the years. All of my plant buying for the last 30 years has been at greenhouses, and each time I got my stuff in one of these things, and I just saved them. And so I don't spend any money on that stuff anymore. But if you're starting out, yogurt containers, for instance, are a perfect little container. And if you look around your world, I think you'll find that there's lots of things. A half-gallon milk carton cut off in the middle is a container for starting seeds, and they all work fine. Perhaps a little less convenient, and later on it'll drive you to spending some money on things that fit together. But for now, I hope that nobody goes away from this discussion feeling like money is a hurdle for doing this. Having said that, in my experience, I think it's fair to say that my home gardening has never impacted my family's food budget. I don't believe that I've saved any food money by gardening. Yes, I put the stuff in mason jars. Yes, I save the stuff and put it in the freezer. But in balance, last year I bought a tiller, that cost, by the time I got it actually working, it cost $1,000. I gotta grow a lot of tomatoes before I can cover the cost of that tiller, to be honest. So I wouldn't insist that anybody do this to save money. But having said that, there are people who earn a living off a 1 acre plot of ground and bring in thousands of dollars once they know what they're doing and find a market for their vegetables and all of that. So it can be productive, but I wouldn't try to sell your mate on the fact that you're going to garden because it's going to save the family money. Go into gardening because it fills your heart rather than your purse, I think. That's a purely personal statement. Okay. The soil mix that I showed you is somebody else's experience about how to put your seeds in the right quilt in their bed. There are lots of formulas out there and you can make your own. There are lots of ways of going down that path. I'm not going to deal with that today. My recommendation is just to go by somebody else's experience as far as the starting mix is concerned, but know that if you really want to do that, you can go online and there are endless people who will help lead you down that path. Just keep in mind that you don't want potting soil. It's inadequate to this task. It's too robust. You want something made specifically for germinating your seeds. We talked about lights, and I suggested to you that you be very careful about using windowsills. Generally speaking, they don't work that well, and they're kind of problematic. We talked about the heat mat, and now the pivotal question: when do you start these things? It's a little bit of a problem. Because if you start your seeds too soon, you're going to end up with a big plant long before the weatherman is providing adequate climate out there. And remember, you can't put anything out until you've gotten past the first frost, by and large, and you want to be transferring your little babies out into soil that's starting to be warm and a cozy place for them to be. So you can't start too soon. And you may find that that's a big problem. Yeah, I get very impatient, and early March, I want to put seeds in the ground. I'm chomping at the bit, and come late May, I find out when, boy, I am really talking a lot, aren't I? All right, you're just going to have to take it as it is. So you can't start too soon. And obviously you can't start too late, because if you start too late, you're not taking advantage of this window of opportunity to get these plants more of a head start. So what's the right moment? Well, it turns out that different seeds, different plants are going to mature at different rates. There's germination rate. That's the time it takes for the seed to break open and put out its first little finger out into the soil. And then there's the point when the seed breaks through the surface. And then there's the point where two little leaves come out. They're not real leaves. They have another name, and I can't remember what it is. Velma, do you know the name of that? The first set of leaves?
I believe they call it primary, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, anyway,
Is it
thank you. There's two of them, and then two more come up, and the second pair are the ones that are called the true leaves. And anyway, that's sort of the end of the first journey for your seeds. And so when do you begin them? You look on the seed packet, and the seed packet tells you how long it takes for this seed or that seed to mature. And we know that the end, a critical element in this story of when do you plant the seeds is when's the last frost. And if you are somebody who monitors your weather at all, you'll know that that's the $64,000 question. When is Vermont's last frost this year going to be? Who knows? The rule of thumb that the old timers use in Vermont is that Decoration Day, that's what it used to be called, at the end of May is when you put your garden out. And so that's supposed to be comfortably past the last frost. I think the Farmer's Almanac official one for my place in Bolton is May 15th. But one way or another, you got to figure out what you think, what your guess is for the last frost, and then how much of a margin you're going to put on that just to get some Vermont safety. I have in front of me, and this is something I'll send to everyone, a list that has vegetables on one side and flowers on the other side. But this particular graph is built on the assumption that May 15th is the last frost. And it lists all kinds of vegetables. And if you had this in front of you, I'm sorry you don't, the length of time that it takes to back up from May 15th to the day when you're going to start your seeds runs from 12 weeks down to 4 weeks. So that means that there are, assuming you're doing a little bit of everything, it's going to take you 10 weeks of playing around with these seeds and these lights to get the full family of plants that you're going to plant. Yesterday, I planted my first seeds, and it included onions, and this chart tells me that I need 11 weeks to do the onions, and then next week, 10 weeks out, I'm going to be doing things like peppers and eggplants and early lettuce, and then 9 weeks out, I'm going to be doing tomatoes and sage and lemon balm. And in 6 weeks out, 6 weeks is all of May, and so middle of April, I'm going to be doing cabbage and broccoli, and so on and so forth. My daughter is a wonder in all kinds of ways, and in anticipation of going back to graduate school in psychology, she came home and is living with us for a time. And God love her, she has computer skills and a need to be accurate and get things down that she did. I don't know if you can see this. I hope you can. I'm showing you multiple pages of spreadsheets that she did for me. What do you call spreadsheets, dear? Oh, never mind. Anyway, lots of spreadsheets, and she's got them listed by weeks, you know. So here is March 15th. This is what I'm supposed to be doing today. My daughter has committed me to doing this. And we have over here how many feet in the garden, how many rows, the length of the rows that we're going to do of a particular vegetable. And then over here is how many plants that will end up being, because some plants, you know, you plant closer than others. And that little check mark right there indicates that I have planted all of those things. But I'm going to show you, boy, I'm sorry, I'm really yakking. I'm going to show you a particular way to add a step in here that I think will help everybody who has had some complicated experience about germinating inside. This is a little Ziploc bag, right? And inside that Ziploc bag is a paper towel folded in half, and then a paper towel with seeds placed on that damp paper towel. And this one says radish, and I put the seeds in on 3/12, and this indicates that it's just a test. Now here's the tricky part that I hope works, and I hope my wife can help me with. Can Linda, could you see if you can get the camera to focus on this?
I can't see that picture.
Okay.
Can you folks see those?
It's too much
No.
glare, too bright, too much glare.
Yeah.
How about that?
The idea.
Okay.
Oh, that's perfect, right there.
Okay. So what we got here is radishes that have been in this paper towel for 4 days. Okay? So what does that mean to us? That means that I can go in here and open up this paper towel, because by looking at it through the light, I can tell that these have all germinated, or some of them have germinated and some of them haven't. So I open up the paper towel, and now, if I did it right, I have all of these seeds exposed to me, okay? And now, where's my, what? The little tray of 6, what did I do with it?
Right there?
Oh, okay. Okay. If you can focus on this, that'd be great. If you can't, so be it. Okay. So here's that paper towel opened up, and I don't know whether you can see it or not. I hope you can, but there's the radish seed, and there's its little root, right? This is a germinated radish, and it's going to go into this medium. I'm going to put it in there and put a little soil around it. I'm going to water it. Okay, now we got a healthy plant. We know it's germinated. It's ready to go. I don't have to do lots of extra ones because they're, I don't have to compensate for the ones that aren't going to germinate and aren't going to take. These guys are healthy and they're ready to go. And it's all been very visible, what worked and what didn't. There's some seeds here that didn't germinate at all. There's some seeds that are kind of wimpy relative to other ones. So I'm going to go in here and just take all of the best looking ones, the biggest ones, and I'm going to transplant them into this frame. And now, like I said, I have in my little setup, I'm trying to do 20 trays. So that would mean I have to have 20 heat mats. That's a pretty big investment, and it would probably blow my electric circuit in this little house of ours. But by doing it this way, all of the germinating that I'm doing is in this one little section on the heat mat. I have I hope you can see this, but this is 8 different seeds that all of which I put in these in this format yesterday, and within 5 or 6 for most of them, some of them 10 or 12 days, they will have germinated, and they can go on to the next step. And then from there on, all they need is light, and for this room to be, 60, 65 degrees, rather than needing to be 85 degrees, which is the temperature that it's at in this germinating spot. Okay? So that's how we do it. And, oh God, use up all my time. Okay. I gotta say one more thing, just because it's really important, and it would be inappropriate to close this hour without speaking to it, and that's a process called hardening off. Giant leap forward. These little plants that we just put into the soil are now 4, 5, 6, 8 inches tall. They've grown up, and the lights have moved up, and now they're bushing out, and we've got these beautiful green plants. You will just be so pleased with yourself. Your efforts are just going to be lovely. Now it's time, and we've gotten to the end of May, and it's almost to the end of May, and it's time to put these plants out in the ground. You're sending your children off to deal with the world. If you move them directly from inside to outside, put them in the ground and walk away, they're all going to die. They're going to die because, just like our children, if they're not nurtured through that transition, they're going to have trouble. So in the gardening world, we call that hardening off. And what it means is that each plant, each tray of plants, needs to make a transition. Most people will do it by getting out into a somewhat sheltered environment, perhaps out in your porch. If you have a closed-in porch, that might be the next easiest step. You don't want to put them directly out in a place where the winds can get at them too soon. Not a radical temperature variation from what they were experiencing inside. Just think about your own kids, and what would they, your grandkids, whatever, what would they need? And of course, sun, maybe not direct sun right off the bat, but a little bit, and for an hour, and then get them back, put them back in the environment that they have known. And then the next day, put them out there for 2 hours. Whatever works in your situation, in terms of the transitional environments that you can find for them. But one way or another, consciously think about getting your children ready for being out in your garden, and give that at least a week. If you gave it 2 weeks, so much the better. But you've got a time, it's May 28th, you want to put them in the ground, so use the week or two before that to help them through this gentle transition. That's called hardening off, and I've totally blown my hour. I'm sorry. I actually thought I was going to do it a lot less, because I really wanted to spend most of our time talking to each other, and but I'll open it up. Does anybody have any questions that maybe we can try to deal with and have enough time to talk?
Jack, I want to add a few things. I don't know if you can see this, but it's important to time when your seedlings are under the light, to time how long that light is on. And so this is a timer that I set to come on at 6 a.m., go off at 10 p.m. So you don't have to worry about the light. Okay, it's just a simple one, maybe costs $7.
Yeah.
Another thing is, you want to make sure your soil in your garden is warm enough before you plant your seeds or your plants. last year I invested in a thermometer. And like, for example, and there's a little list that came with it telling you the temperature. Like broccoli, the temperature, soil temperature should be 50 degrees. So this was, to me, it was worth buying because I had a tendency to plant things a little early and then they would grow, but it'd be a slow start.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for both of those pieces of equipment suggestions. Yeah, the timer is just
You need one.
it's cheap and you absolutely need one. Even if you're just using one little light, you can walk away and it'll turn it on and off. And incidentally, the plants need a minimum of 12 hours of those lights on.
Correct.
Some people would say even 16 hours of on time with the lights. So having a timer just makes all the difference in the world. It's another one of the reasons why doing this windowsill just doesn't work, because there's no way you're getting 12 hours of light, no matter how wonderfully open your windowsill happens to be. Yeah, and the soil temperature is really critical. And I can't, if I stick my finger in the soil, I can't tell you what temperature it is. So do you remember what that meter cost, Thelma?
Oh, I'm going to say I ordered it through Harris Seeds, and I'm going to say maybe around $10 to $12.
Yeah.
Certainly no more than that.
Cool. Yeah, getting to know your soil is a whole nother discussion. But right now we're just talking about nurturing these babies. But an integral part of that is the temperature of the soil when you finally put them out there. And so, yeah, important equipment. Anybody else? Oh boy. Does that mean everybody is asleep? Or I've been so comprehensive that you're just overwhelmed with information and I covered all bases.
Let me add a few things, unless nobody has questions, about containers you can use. And again, I think these are called like a Jiffy plug. You set them in water, they'll get to be about 2 inches tall. Those were the thing with these. You have to make sure they don't dry out.
Yeah.
And I put them in something like this, just a plastic container something came in.
Can people see Velma? I can't see Velma and what she's showing.
Velma, you need to hold it up higher to your camera. You're holding it in front, but we're not up to the camera.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
the little
Can you
Jiffy
see
plug.
it? Oh, okay. And then these are little Jiffy pots you can use.
Yeah.
Okay. And I use the Keurig K-cups and yogurt cups. Make sure you drill a hole in the bottom.
Yeah.
So those are just some ideas for starting. You don't have to invest in a lot of fancy pots or anything. And another question came up. I know Janet Gill had it and Polly did. I do start pumpkins and squash and cucumbers inside. I do use potting soil for them in a larger pot, and it works great. And again, I wait and test my soil before I put them in the garden. And I do find they probably end up being about 2 weeks earlier than when I actually plant the seed in the garden.
Uh-huh. Yeah, if you haven't dealt with these seeds much, you will know that the seeds that Velma is talking about are nice size seeds. They're big, plus, and my sense is that they got bigger muscles, so they can tolerate a more resistant medium for doing that initial. In fact, they something like they explode very quickly, and anyway, yeah, good point. Anybody else? Come on, I know we're over time, but
I'll ask a question. I'm interested in your system of germinating your seeds in a Ziploc bag.
Yeah.
And you're putting them on the heat pad. That happens to be the heat pad that's connected to the thermostat. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's Thank you for that. That's an excellent point. To do this particular system, the whole point is to have a really controlled environment. And the heat mats by themselves just crank out a fixed amount of heat. And it's possible in that situation to get the seeds too hot. So a couple things, I've got some insulating kitchen towels below and above, and then that thermostat, that little temperature, like the end of your thermometer that goes in your mouth, that slides in there with those plastic bags. And then the important thing is that it has control, so I can set the temperature. The one I've got right now, I'm running it at 80 degrees. And so that packet of Ziploc bags are in a very fixed heat environment, and they're the Ziplocs are sealed, and I've been sprayed the paper towels with water, so they're nice and moist. If there was any indication any time around that it was getting dried out, then you'd want to get back in there and get some more moisture. But it's a little incubator.
Right, and so in the thermostat, you're plugging the mat into the thermostat, and then the thermostat will either turn the mat on or off. Is that correct?
No, actually, yes, I'm sorry. The probe is in with the Ziploc bags,
Right.
and if it reads
The
that
mat
the
is
temperature is going higher or lower, it turns the mat on and off. Yes, that's
Okay.
its function.
And is there any need to have that surface tilted so all of the roots will go downward? Is there a downward or upward for seeds so they don't curl around, or flat is fine?
That's a great question. The only experience I have is with it flat, and with it flat, it goes out all over the place. But it doesn't seem to be much of a problem. And I've
Right.
just been using my fingers to peel them up
Pick 'em
from the
up.
paper and put them in the ground. I can imagine other people might want to use a tool to do that. My daughter has had me doing it for her in a garden that she was managing, and she used chopsticks as a more gentle tool
I would
for.
probably snap the root with a chopstick.
I think you got to figure out what your particular fingertips can do and work accordingly. I didn't say, but obviously you've got the option of just putting the seed directly into soil. These guys here, this is thyme, and thyme happens to need sunlight to germinate. So this Ziploc bag thing doesn't work for them.
It has to be on top of the soil.
So this guy is still on a heat mat, but it has access to sunlight for that germinating process. It does mean that you got to be a lot more diligent about the watering. So you've got a heat mat that's drying out the soil, and so you got to be back in there replenishing the water supply.
Okay. This has been super helpful. Thank you very much. I'm heading out.
Thank you. All right, and unless somebody is burning, I think we should call it a day. Yes, no? Anybody? Martha, you're the boss. What's the word here? We finished?